Helen Keller, Chapter 7. A Time to Move On. As soon as Helen woke up, she knew something wonderful was going to happen today. It was a fine, crisp fall day. But Helen knew it wasn't that. Then she remembered. The circus had come to Tuscumbia, and Teacher was taking her today. Helen's nose began to twitch even before they got to the circus grounds. Hot sausages, meat pies, onions, lemonade, coffee, spun sugar candy. What wonderful smells were coming from there. Helen tugged on Teacher's hand. Hurry, she meant. The circus people soon heard about the little deaf and blind girl who had come to their show. They wanted to see that she had a good time, and they thought of a way. They made Helen a part of the show. She sat in the lap of a lady called the Oriental Princess and rode around the ring in a flower-covered cart. She touched the spangled dresses of the pretty dancing girls. She ran her hands over the funny-faced clowns. But best of all were the animals. After the show was over, the circus people led Helen to where the animals lived in their cages. "Is she afraid of animals?" one of the circus people asked. "No," Teacher answered. "Helen likes to touch anything that moves." And the animals seemed to sense that Helen Keller was different from the other boys and girls, so they were especially gentle with her. Helen patted a lion, she shook hands with a bear, she fed peanuts to an elephant and asked, "What does he have such a long nose for?" A leopard licked her hand with his rough tongue. A man held Helen up to feel the ears of a giraffe. A snake curled itself around her arm. She played with the monkeys, and the monkeys played with her. One monkey stole her hair ribbon. Another tried to snatch flowers out of her hat. Helen laughed so hard she almost began to choke. "I don't know who had the better time," the animal keeper said later, "Helen or my monkeys." Okay, here's the picture. There it is. And the other picture. Cool. Then it was December. "Do you know what happens this month?" Teacher spelled. Helen shook her head. "Christmas." But Helen's face stayed blank. She was 7 years old, but up until now, Christmas had never held any meaning for her, so everything was new. Teacher spelled out Christmas stories for Helen and the words of old songs. She taught Helen to play Christmas games. Helen helped her mother bake huge batches of Christmas cookies and candies and cakes. She made presents for everyone in the house. Finally, Christmas Eve came. Helen was so excited she could not go to sleep. "You'll have to," Teacher spelled, "or Santa Claus won't come." So Helen closed her eyes and smiled. "Santa Claus will think girl is asleep," she spelled. But finally Helen did go to sleep, and the next thing she knew the day was there. "Merry Christmas," she spelled into Teacher's hand. "Wake up." Teacher yawned and rubbed her eyes. "Helen Keller," she scolded, "do you know what time it is? It isn't even light out yet." But of course that didn't matter to Helen. The dark was her familiar word. What a Christmas day that was. Helen found surprises everywhere, on the table, on the chairs, under the Christmas tree downstairs. "I could hardly walk," she wrote later, "without stumbling over a bit of Christmas wrapped up in tissue paper." When Teacher handed her a live canary in a cage, Helen thought she would burst with Christmas joy. Mrs. Keller watched her daughter playing happily. There were tears in her eyes as she turned toward Teacher. "Miss Annie," Helen's mother said, "I have thanked God every day for sending you to us, but I did not know until this morning what a blessing you have been." On spring day of 1888, Teacher received an important letter. It was from Mr. Michael Anagnos, the director of Perkins Institute. Annie Sullivan had studied there as a child, and that was where she had learned how to help Helen. Now Mr. Anagnos invited them both to come visit his school. Teacher frowned as she read the letter. This was probably a good idea. Helen was asking harder and harder questions every day. Some teacher could not answer. Soon Helen would need more teachers. But was Helen ready to go into the world? After all, only a year had gone by since Helen had learned there was a real world at all. Would people think she was still too different? Would they pity her too much? Teacher thought back over all Helen had learned how to do. She could talk with her fingers and listen with the palm of her hand. She knew just as many words as any other 8-year-old child. She could read raised print books. She could write with a pencil. She was even learning how to read and write in Braille, the raised dot language of the blind. And there were some things Helen could do better than other people. She could tell the difference between a dog's bark of welcome and his first warning growl by putting her hand on his throat. She knew when she was in a room with books in it by the smell of paper and ink. She could tell people apart by touch. Helen said some people had frosty fingertips, and she didn't like to touch them. Others, she said, have hands that warm my heart. Yes, teacher finally decided their first year of discovery was over. It was time to move on. The end of that chapter.